Hello, and welcome to the Uncharted Way podcast, where we dive deep into the profound stories of ordinary individuals navigating their destinies in ways society seldom allows. In this space, we explore the courageous journeys of those who defy societal and cultural norms, forging paths that not only feel fulfilling, but challenge the very fabric of our expectations. And today we have the wonderful Nikki Dean, a dear friend of mine who I have come to know and love. And I'm just so excited to welcome her here with us today.
Thank you, Sari. It's such an honor to be here on your podcast. I just love watching you in your radiance and what you're doing. And I feel like you leave a little wake of goddesses in your trail wherever you go. So I'm really honored to be in your wake today.
Thank you. So you and I have gotten to know each other well over the past 6 to 8 months. And, you have this genuine outlook on life and you really see through the cracks of where the shit isn't working. And I would love to just know, like, where did that come from? What have you been through that really catapulted this kind of way of being within your life, and maybe like just a starting point of where maybe that wasn't happening in your life?
Such an interesting question. When I think about that, it's like my whole life has been this. And when I look back on my younger self, even my teenage self, my young 20 self, I just didn't have the language that I have now, but I was doing all the things that I came to have language for. And mainly the biggest thing was I could never not follow my own impulses. And I remember even being a really young girl, and when my parents would say no to me about something, I have this mix of like empowerment and shame that's like mixed inside me because I always felt like just because you are older than me, how dare you think you know me and what's best for me? Now I get it, right? Parent child, right? That dynamic. But the shame part would come because I would have uncontrollable tears would just stream. And I always felt like I had no control over that emotion. But when I look back now and I do have more language for it, it was powerlessness. It was this feeling which all of the work that I've done in my adult life, I've been a spiritual teacher now for 20 years in different modalities, and I just keep growing and finding more teachers that help me articulate and then put these things together. But, we have this idea, and even as a parent myself, we have this idea like, one person is supposed to guide another person, like I'm in charge of you, I'm in charge of your safety, I'm in charge of your morality, of your ethics, all of these things. And of course, like, yeah, we want everybody to thrive and be happy, but it doesn't mean that just because you're smaller you don't know what right is and what's right in
Mm.
your heart. And so when somebody outside of me was saying things like that just took away that power and told me you don't know you, I had I could never get on that train. And my tears would give me away, and then I learned how to really manage that a little bit better and control that and hopefully not just stuff
And
it down.
I love that though too, how like as a child, like you're already feeling this sadness that you don't get to be you. And oh my gosh, I mean, it's just like my heart's like just pounding right now, just even thinking about that. And the fact that you had that awareness at that age, to know like, yeah, like you say, I mean, you're older than me, you're my parent, but like, and ultimately they're telling you that because of their own conditioning and the way they've lived and how somebody told them how to live. And therefore they're telling you that, but there's something inside of you that's like, fuck no, like this is who I am. And you're more like almost like mourning it, right? Because you're so upset. Oh,
Yeah. And like what you just tapped into, right? It's like now you have people that have been conditioned out of their own alignment trying to put other people in alignment, but that doesn't work. And I just think I just knew that that was a truth that was within me that nobody could condition out of me from a very young age. And I'm the youngest and I am the only girl in my family. So birth order and, gender, I think they really make a difference in how you're treated. And so in
The
one
rebel.
way, yeah. Well, in one way, I got away with quite a lot. By the time they get to the third child, like they're not as strict, right? There's a little more leeway, but also, um, I was the student in my family. I was the one, and I really cared. I'm a recovering workaholic overachiever, and I was in college, and I was at Cornell, and my parents were so proud. My brothers, who are both very successful adults, right? School wasn't really their thing, but I was like the thread of hope when it came to academia. And my second semester at Cornell, I took an anthropology class, and this is in the 90s, and I thought I was cultured. I grew up right outside New York City, and I thought I was so cultured. I traveled a little bit with my family. I knew people from all over the world. Sitting in this class, and I'm just going, wait, what is going on in the world? People are living how and doing what? Like right now in the 1990s? Like where I grew up, it wasn't, are you going to college? What are you doing after high school? It's where are you going? Everything was just assumed. Everything was a preparation for the next step, right? You have to do this well so you can get to that next thing. So you can get into a good college, you can get the good jobs, you can have the good life and have all the things, right? And I'm sitting in this class, and I left that class. I walked out of there, and I walked straight home, and I called my parents and I said, I've decided I'm going to take a leave of absence from school for a semester. And they went, "What? No, 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 you can't do that." And I only spoke one language. I still only speak one language of English. So I said, I really feel this need to go live in another culture. I just want to
Mm.
immerse myself in another culture and see what that feels like. So I said, I think I'm going to drop out of Cornell and go and work at a pub in London. Now you
Hell
can imagine
yeah.
how this might have been met by my family.
Oh, and they're
And
like, hell no.
they were not impressed. They were not on board at all. And so there was a lot of pushback. But again, it was a knowing, like this had to happen. I knew this had to happen. I knew that I could not just float through another semester or year or the rest of this education in the same way. Something had already shifted in me. And I was raised Jewish. And so I kind of played that card on my parents, and I said, oh, well, what if I went to Israel? And I went from like,
Mm.
no, 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 you're going to ruin your life, to, oh, we're so proud of you, daughter. Wow, look at you. And in all fairness, my parents are wonderful. They are actually, operating from their own conditioning. So for them, that felt like a more legit reason to
Yeah.
go. And it felt like a step more in the right direction than going to work in a pub, which I can get, right?
But I think that is so almost needed when you think about like universities, right? And where we are in this day and age, number one, what they cost, right? And how most kids, I mean, by the time that they graduate just with a bachelor's are like what, 22 years old, and how you're still just a kid at that point, and you really don't. I mean, I feel like I knew what I wanted to do at that point, but I was so naive at the same time. And I urge my kids all the time. I'm like, look, you want to go to college? I fully support you, but you're going to take a year off, and I'm going to give you 20 grand to go discover yourself first. And then you can come back and decide what you want to study. But spending all this money, and like most people don't even use their major for anything that they use. So the fact that you're having this aha moment in the middle of your anthropology class and you're like, fuck this, I'm out, I need to go figure out who I am, I think it's amazing.
And this was before gap years were, and that was a term or that was anything. This is very unusual. And you're right. I mean, and as we speak right now, my son, who graduated from high school in June, is in New Zealand doing a gap year. But we didn't fund him. We had him work and make the money to travel, because I thought for us that felt like an important part of understanding money and how it works.
For sure.
Um, but yeah, it was very against the norm. And one of the things they had said to me at that time, I always joke like, and I, again, like I did the work, I was doing the work, I was doing the learning, but it's also a very expensive party for most people. Even at a
Right.
school, an Ivy League school, you find a lot of that. And so my parents tried to push me in that direction of like, well, why don't you just do a study abroad program for a semester? And I was adamant, no, I will just end up on a campus in another country meeting. Instead of being with the kids that I'm with now, I'll meet kids from Michigan, I'll meet kids from UCLA, right? Like this, I'm just going to go and meet a bunch of American kids who have the
Yeah.
resources to go and do these kinds of things. And I didn't want any of that. And even on that trip, I mean, I had some money that had been given over the years that I used for that trip. My parents didn't pay for it. And I found ways. It made me so resourceful. I mean, I was 20, had just turned 20. Um, and I looked for opportunities. So, like, how could I do this? And I found this. There was a program where I could volunteer in the Army on a service base. And for me, that was like, it was like striking gold, because what I wanted the most was to be immersed in the culture and meet
Right.
Israelis, meet the people where I was. So I got a subsidized flight off that. I got to live on a kibbutz for 2 months, working in vineyards. So if you don't know what a kibbutz is, it's like a communal living where everything is provided. Everybody works there. Everything is provided. They even do your laundry, your food, all of that. And there were people was with volunteers from South Africa and all over Europe and Russia, and that kind of education, you can't buy that, right? And
Right.
so when I went, and I still remember this, when I went back to school that next fall, it was the first time in my life. And again, I just say, and I don't say this as any kind of brag, like for me, it's almost like a joke. Like I was a straight A student my whole life. And it was the first time that I sat down in a chair and I like leaned forward and I was like, what do you got for me? Like, what do you have for me to fill my knowledge, fill me up with wisdom, with, expand my universe right here, instead of what do I need to do for the A? Because I'm very good at charming the teachers. I know what they
Mm.
want. I know how to play that game.
Well, seeing it
So
as like information that can really like fuel you and like how you move forward versus it just being a learning thing, right? And that, and I think that's where a lot of people lose ambition and learning, period, right? Because they're just not interested. They're just like, it's something you have to do, or it's what everybody else does, right? It's not like getting in there and just being like, oh, I mean, I remember when I started my spiritual journey and I started like really like listening to books and listening to people speak, and I was like, I love to learn. Like, this is fun. Like, this is giving me something, right? And that sounds like that's what you were going in there now with this new awareness, this new culture, this new diversity that you had before you went.
yeah, I think, I hadn't put this together until now, but I really think it was the first time I felt like I was becoming a person. I don't know if that even translates, but it's like, instead of just going through the motions, like this is what you do and you fit into life, it was like, no, how does life fit into me? How do I
Mm,
create this, instead of just keep following these tracks that were laid out by someone that I don't know who laid them out. I don't know if I want to follow them. And it's
right.
been, again, as a parent now, my younger son is a junior, and it's something that I think about a lot. We have discussions about, and I get it. The school systems they're dealing with a lot of different people, and they're trying to do their best to service the most. But somewhere along the way, I think they forgot. Interesting, if it ever was, I don't know. And so I look at my son, who is so naturally bright, and we've had conversations about how, what do you like about school this year. It's a little bit better, but even last year it was like he didn't care for a single one of his classes. He wasn't inspired by any of them. And it felt like, if I had any other solution, like, I'm not a homeschool mom, that's just not my thing. And he's also kind of past that, and he doesn't want to be homeschooled. We did look at some other options, but I just thought, what am I teaching you If I
Right.
am now saying you have to spend 4 years of your life every day doing something that is not inspiring to you in any way, and and then I hear this voice and people will say, well, that's life. And I'm like, that is not life. And
Right.
that is not, and I feel like that's where, when I reflect back, because of the work I do now is a lot about unconditioning. Like, how is our conditioning getting in the way of who we are and how much fun we can have in this life and how much we can create in this life? And it starts at such a young age where you're rewarded for very certain behaviors
Well, and
and
I
you're
think
told, mm-hmm,
that even goes back to just like the caliber of the people that are teaching, right? And if they're not inspired by what they're doing, how can they inspire us? I mean, I didn't have a teacher that really inspired me until I was a senior in high school. And it was this one teacher, his name was Mr. Davis, and I went to an arts magnet school. I was a dancer. And, for most of the day, you're doing your art. And then obviously you had like your core classes that you had to take, but he was my English teacher. And I remember he did short stories and we had to journal about them, but he wanted us to journal about how they were like reflecting in our day-to-day lives. And it was the first time I actually got awareness in my own life, comparing it to the short stories that we were learning. And I was so involved. I was so like, wow. And he would respond in our journals, like, and have food for thought and ask you questions. And it was just like, he was really inspired to teach us. But the fact that I only had one teacher like that through my entire grade school, life is just sad. Like, why are you becoming a teacher? If you like, becoming a teacher and just teaching, how to read and write is one thing, but teaching, you are a whole part of this child's life for a year, if not more. And what are you doing to inspire them? And so, anyways, not to go on a teacher rant, but I think that like that's really important when we think about how we're being molded as humans and the people that are inspiring us around us.
yeah, but I think, I don't necessarily think it's like a teacher issue. I think it's like they get so I like to believe that they have really good intentions and that they do go in it for that passion, right? Because you don't go into it for the pay, that's for sure, right? So
Right.
like you'd have to do it for the love of teaching and of learning and maybe children. But I just think that there's so many hoops you have to jump through and doing things certain ways. And again, it's like I don't know if it's like a common denominator thing where they're trying to find out how they can make what they are passionate about work, and then it just doesn't fit in the system. I think it's more of a system
That's probably
challenge, and
true.
I don't know. I'm not well versed, so I don't mean to overstep, and say anything that offends. I really appreciate. I've had great relationships with my kids' teachers, but I feel the same way. But I look back and I just think, gosh, high school teachers, they have such a hard job. I mean,
Sure.
so maybe it's that combination. But again, I go back to, like, it's the setup. You're set up from the beginning. It's a performance. It's not about it's all about the grades. And I learned this a few years ago that that homework, what really became a thing during the Cold War, because Americans wanted to be smarter than Russians. And so they started pushing more. But that exams, like testing, it started out as a way for the teachers to test whether or not they were getting across the information. And then somewhere along the way it flipped. And now it's like, how about the students and how much are you picking up on? And it becomes
Right.
your fault and your problem or your success.
Yeah.
So
And I agree. I have an issue with that for sure as well. We had standardized tests in Texas. And um, you know, to me, when you have someone who is, in the like arts and science and math, who they think a certain way, but then you have somebody else who's in like language and reading and they think a different way, and you make them take a test and they're supposed to score a certain level, but their brain just doesn't think the way the other person's thinks. How can you have a fucking standardized test? And so a friend was telling me about unschooling recently, which I guess is like a form of homeschool, but they don't actually recommend it until they're in like seventh or eighth grade because then they want them to take what are they passionate about and start really diving into that, academically versus just doing all the things that you're supposed to do, because now they're inspired by something. And I just thought, like, I love that, because this is how their brain's working. This is getting them passionate. This is maybe making them lean in and like, want to think more into it. And so, yeah, versus the teacher getting across the things that they're supposed to teach and the child actually being passionate about what they're doing.
Well, and I mean, this is my wheelhouse here. Like, this is part of what you're talking about is also the strengths movement. And I'm been studying positive psychology on my own for the last 20 years. I do lots of teaching about this kind of stuff. And, the strengths movement came along and they just said, what if we stopped looking at what was wrong with people and looked at what was right with people instead? And so what the tendency is if you have a kid that's doing amazing in art and dance and maybe loves English or, something, maybe not even English, right? Maybe arts and dance, like that could be enough, really struggling with math. Most people would put all of their energy into the math. You got to get better at this. Let's get you a tutor. How's the math going, right? It becomes this really heavy focus. But it's like, okay, can you make change? Can you balance why don't we just teach? Don't even get me started on math, because I don't understand why my kid has to learn pre-calculus but isn't given a course on what does APR mean and what's a good way to budget your money and balance, especially because everything's digital now, right? Like,
I
that would
agree.
be useful. But anyway, what I digress a little, but what we do is we put all of our energy on what's not working. And that kid who struggles with math is never going to go and become a mathematician. That's not
Right.
where your happiness lies. So make sure they're passable, and then throw everything you have into the thing that they love. And that's where you see the best of people. And I just think that in general, and again, this is, going back to your original question, is like, I always had such a strong sense inside of me and a really strong knowing of what felt right and what felt wrong. And I don't mean that from a morality stance of like, it's, be kind, do this, that. No, no. Like, do I want to play soccer or not play soccer? Do I want to go take a semester off from school or not? What those kinds of feelings. I was so clear on what felt like my path and what didn't. And so I would get swayed a little here and there, but I kept rebounding back. Like, there's just, the pull is too strong. And, that's kind of been what's guided my whole life now, because I used to think I was just impatient. I couldn't wait for things, but what I realized is I have no tolerance to be somewhere that is stealing my joy and
Mm.
to do something. I had a conversation with one of my brothers recently about work, and we were laughing, and he's very successful financially. He's doing so amazing. I'm so happy for him. And he also said, and never once, not one day in his life has he worked for passion. He doesn't even know what that would mean. And he has a great life. Like, don't get me wrong, right? He plays tennis and he goes on really nice trips, and, he makes his day to day really awesome. But still, for me, that it's just not an option. I could not
Yeah.
spend very much time. I just, the, if I'll say, okay, I had a job once in PR, and I was like, okay, this is a new field. I'd always kind of been in communications prior to that. And I said, this is a new field and I'm learning something new and this is great. And I'll make sure to give it at least a year. And then it just really was not working. And I started to even like emotionally have outbursts that were unrelated. And I realized, oh, I am so unhappy at my job that it's
Mm.
trickling into my life, and I'm having almost like temper tantrums, like, if like out of nowhere. And I didn't even make it 6 months. As soon as I made that connection, I was like, I'm out. I quit. I can't do it. I
Yeah.
don't care what it looks like on my resume. And,
Well, and I
now we
think
come.
that's so beautiful I mean, I think most people, even going back to, what you're talking about, just being young and having this like knowing of like, no, I'm not going to do it. Right. And I think ultimately that being like your inner intuition, your inner guidance, that most people, it gets squashed down at some point within childhood. And for whatever fiery reason, you said, hell no. And, I think that's so amazing. And like, what a gift that's given you. And when people start feeling like that fire of intuition coming up of like saying it's not working for them, like most of them just tend to like ignore it and move like with the herd, like you're supposed to, right? And that's what I think is so beautiful about you and your just understanding and your own intuition of like, just fuck this, I'm out, this isn't working. And I think if we took more of that idea and realizing the minute that like we're just not happy, like what is the reason you're not happy, number one, and is it because it's just not in alignment, or are you throwing a fit, or what is happening that this isn't working? And for you to be so aware of that, like what an amazing gift to have.
I mean, now it feels like a gift. There were definitely times where it didn't, and it was not always very well received. And I keep, throughout my life, it's also, I've surprised myself so many times. Like if you had told me 20 years ago that I would be where I am now, living in a ski town, doing the type of work I'm doing as a manifestation coach, and even as a yoga teacher, which I've been a yoga teacher for 20 years, but had you told me back when I was a teenager or even early 20s like that, that's what I would be doing, I would have laughed in your face. That is not my plan. I grew up right outside New York City in the suburbs, and it was always my dream. Like, I'm going to live in Manhattan. I'm even going to raise a family in Manhattan. I used to think I'm going to be a businesswoman. Like when I was growing up, I would always think I'm going to be like my dad. I'm going to own my business. And after college, I just happened to get a job in television production. And then one job led to another job. And I was living in New York City. I had a dream job. I was working for VH1. It was the late 90s. So this is when VH1, MTV were so cool. I had a great apartment, all my friends, like everything was great. And I mean, I used to be able to call up venues, 24, 25 years old, call up venues and say, hey, this is Nikki Dean from VH1, and I want to come check out the band tonight. And they would say, no problem, we'll put you on the guest list. I mean, there was nothing wrong with my life except for the fact that I was really not happy. And I started to notice it more and more that, and, I was even looking at taking some time off. I wanted to go on this trip and I wanted to go on that trip. And I kept hearing, well, that's not a good time. We're in production on this, and that's not a good time. And that's not a good time. And I thought, wait a minute, like because I was young and single, right? I had money, I had the time, I had the time saved, but I couldn't even use it. And I just had this feeling like, wait a minute, this is not the life that I want. And I had worked my way up from, lowly bottom of the bottom barrel, production assistant to segment producer, less than a month away from full promotion to producer. And I knew that. And I went on a ski trip, and it wasn't even a ski trip. I went to the Sundance Film Festival, and I ended up meeting a local who taught me how to snowboard, which had been a dream of mine. I grew up skiing, had been a dream. I really want to learn this snowboarding, and I was terrible at it. But I remember that feeling. I strapped on this snowboard. I went 2 feet. I fell on my ass, and I was like, I have to learn this. And I spent 4 days. I mean, by the end of the 4 days, I had like one elbow I could land on. I mean, I was bruised everywhere, but I was like, and I went back to New York, and every time I blinked, it was like I could see these mountains and that blue sky and the pine trees, and it just wouldn't go away. And I started thinking, okay, and again, this is the same pattern I have. So this is in January, and then in February I start thinking, okay, well maybe next winter I'll just go to a ski town for like a month. And then time is passing on, and by April, it was like totally unplanned, but I walked into my boss's office to talk about a script that I was writing. And I just looked at her and I was like, Shelly, I quit. She was like, what? And I just said, this isn't right. It's just not feeling right. And I remember walking out of the office and starting to like, it really was not planned. And so I
Yeah.
walked out and started telling all the people, and they were like, what do you mean? Like, how could you leave? Because I knew that promotion was right there. The other producer was leaving. It was happening. And my parents, just like with school, I was not met with, oh, we're so proud of you. What a great idea. It was, you're throwing your life away. What are you doing? How can you do this? You're on track. What do you mean you're going to go to a ski town? What? And I just followed one impulse after the other. I didn't try to plan the whole thing out. I just had this calling, and I knew in my heart, and I heard those words in my head, like, this is not the life that you thought it was. This isn't what you
Mm,
thought you wanted. And I do really think most people would have just kind of ignored that, but it's just not in my DNA. I couldn't. And so I just was like following the impulses. One thing led to the next thing. And I just went to visit a friend in San Francisco. And then she said, well, why don't you move out here and take care of my dog so I can move in with my boyfriend who's allergic to my dogs? I said, okay, why not? I got no plans. And I went there, and it was the same thing. It was like, okay, I mean, and this is what happens. This is why I think that the more you do this, the more you're inspired to do it, because when you follow those impulses, the way things unfold are better than you could write them. There is better than you can
totally.
imagine. And I went out and I had just gotten a tax return. So I was like, I don't even need money. I don't have a lot of expenses, right? I don't even have to pay for my apartment because I get to watch this dog. And literally dream jobs just like handed in my lap. Hey, here's this freelance job. You want this? It pays really okay, I could do that. So all this stuff falling in my lap. And then I just said, wait a minute, I'm not in a ski town. I want to be in a ski town. And Tahoe was the closest to where I was. So I just said, well, I'll go check that out. And I came here at a time when I know, and it's way worse now, but I know people were like, would spend months looking for a place to live. The first person that I called, moving into the most amazing house that I had visited Tahoe 4 years before that, stayed with someone who lived in that same exact house. I mean, you can't write that. Like, that's
That's crazy.
level of coincidence. And I moved here on November 1st, 1999 from New York via San Francisco. In February, met my husband, who I'm now married to for over 22 years. We both moved here on November 1st, 1999. Him from New Zealand via England, via London.
Wow.
I mean, again, like, and it was, we were married in a year. We have the best relationship. I feel so blessed. My career in health and wellness just unfolded so naturally, one thing after the other, because I followed my heart, to the
Right.
point where I got to create my life instead of waiting. I have this really good friend who has a job where she'll be pensioned, and we were a couple years ago, we were together, and she had been out here for a couple years, and she said something like, only 19 more years until I can retire with full pension.
Oh my
Just
gosh.
like, it was like she punched me in the stomach. I was like, and I love, good for her. Like, I am not, there's no judgment here. I want to be really clear about that. Like, if that works for her and that feels good, I'm wonderful. But for me, my instant thought was like, I wouldn't last a year. I'm waiting for my life. Your life is now, you don't know how long you have. I don't mean this
No.
to be morbid, but like, I don't know how long I have here. I'm not going to wait. I need to live now.
Well, I think too, like people just tend to have or tend to lack this idea that there can be anything else for you, right? And even as you're saying, like, you quit your job and like all this shit fucking showed up for you. Yeah, because you let go of the baggage that wasn't serving you, right? And when we let go of that baggage, like there's so much more available and we make space for that. And if we don't believe that like there's something on the other side of the thing that's holding us to the weight that we're experiencing, then it's not going to show up, right? And we're not going to let it go. And I mean, my husband's the same way. He's a nurse and he's a contract nurse. He travels, and so he's constantly getting a new contract, and he'll be like, oh, well, so and so says that this place isn't giving out, the pay that we want, and there's just nothing available. And I'm like, well, you fucking created it, so there's nothing available, right? But if you actually believe that pay that you want is there at the place that you want, it's gonna fucking show up. But when you channel just this blinder idea that somebody else has told you it's not there, and you've now believed it as your belief system, it's not going to work out. And so, and now that he had moved to nights, and he was hating it. He was like, I hate working nights. This is awful. It sucks for our family. And I was like, well, like, you didn't believe that there was anything else out there. So this showed up for you, your worst nightmare. And I was like, when you can start letting that go and believing that you can go back to days with the same amount of pay, it's going to show up. And like, he was waiting for it to be after his contract, and it ended up showing up like within a few weeks because he started changing his mindset. And I'm like, you didn't even have to wait till after your contract was over. It showed up because you made the agreement that it could. And how often people just don't even allow that new possibility to show up for them because they feel like nothing has their back, or there's not a bigger force of life working for them. It's working against them.
Well, making decisions from fear instead of faith, right? But you said that word believe. I mean, belief is everything. And a few years ago, I was at a leadership conference, and when it finished, the day after, I woke up in the morning, and I think it was 3 or 4 days of listening to speaker after speaker, and all of them talking about, like, this is how I did it. This is how I did it. This is how I did it. Like, each one had their own thing that made them very successful at what they were doing. And it was like my first thought. I woke up in the morning, right? Because your mind is relaxed. And I sat up and I went, oh, you don't get what you want. You get what you believe. It's
Yeah.
as simple as that, right? And so if you believe that it's your lot in life to suffer through something like that, that's part of you, well, then that's what you'll get. You'll get reasons to suffer. And I have so much evidence I've been collecting with myself and my clients, and just in my personal life as well over the last few years, of just this evidence of, oh yeah, look, you get what you believe. You get what you believe every single time. And there are definitely those people out there that are like, well, you don't know, right? You don't know my story, and you don't know this, and you don't know that. And it's like, but what I do know is that the law of attraction is the most powerful law of the universe, and like attracts like.
Yeah.
So I always go back to the bottom line. And again, this is where, like, now I have language for things that I didn't have language for before. It's like, when something's not right, what the majority of people will do is they will talk about why it's not right, how they got there. Right? It's like, I want you to really understand me. So let me tell you everything that bad that led up to this moment that has me in this place, so that you can understand that I'm not making this up. I'm like,
Right.
I understand you're not making any of this up, but you are carrying
Yeah.
it forward.
Yeah.
Every time you do that, you bring it forward, and you bring it forward, and you bring it forward. So you get to ask yourself, what do I want? Right? Is this what I want? Right? And so when you're in that moment of experiencing something that doesn't work for you, like working night shifts, I hate working night shifts. It's like, well, how much of the time is spent talking about how much you hate night shifts
Right.
versus, I'd love to work days. It'd be so nice to work a day shift. I'd love to wake up and have breakfast with my kids. I'd love to wake up next to you every morning, Sari, and get up together, right? Things like that, right? But that's not how we're trained.
Right.
And even if it's not on that level of like what you want to do, it's like this, there's that other side of it of like, well, you better be prepared for great loss. Like, I feel like that's the fear thing. It's like always that expression, like waiting for that other shoe to drop. Like, you better watch out, because if things are going really well, you better watch out, because something bad's going to happen. It's like, how does that even make any sense?
Right.
Right?
Waiting for the shoe to fall.
Exactly. But we're so trained into that. And so then we keep getting more of it. And then we have more evidence to support that where we are, but it's like, it's such a simple little circle, right? You have a thought, then you're feeling whatever you're thinking. And whatever you're feeling drives your actions. And then
Right.
your actions create your results, which reinforces what you're thinking.
Well,
And then
it's
the
a
more you keep
cycle.
thinking, yeah. And then I love this from Abraham Hicks. They say that a belief is just a thought that you keep thinking. And so if you want to change what is happening, you have to change your beliefs, which requires you to change your thoughts. But the good news about that is that is the only thing that you can do. That's like the only place you have control in your life is of your thoughts. And I tell like my people is like, there's only one place you need to apply discipline. Like, you don't even worry about what you're eating or track your exercise. I mean, those things are great too, right? But, or whether it's your finances, your relationship, it doesn't matter. But if you just apply that discipline to your thoughts and continuously ask yourself, am I thinking more about the problem or the solution?
Right.
Well, then do you want more problems or do you want more solutions?
Well, and I was like one of my biggest manifestation stories, I swear to this date. And people could say like, oh, that's just a coincidence or things like that. But it was when I really started meditating. And at the time, my hormones were really imbalanced and I was overweight and I was starting to change my mental thoughts and things like that through meditation. And I was starting to feel better mentally. But like one of my biggest things was I wanted to lose weight. I knew that all this weight that I was carrying like was not mine. But I didn't know how to get rid of it. And so I was like, okay, I was a dancer most of my life and I was taking these hip hop classes at the time. And all I would do was in my meditations, I would think about myself dancing in the mirror in like a bra top and leggings and just looking exactly how I wanted to look. And I would turn on music in the car and I'd see myself in that vision dancing. And I would do this over and over and over every day and meditate on it and go to class and actually dance as it and all these things. And then, like, not even 4 months later, I met my functional doctor that I see now and love. And she put all of my hormonal puzzle pieces back together. I lost like 40 pounds. And then I ended up getting my mommy makeover paid for, like all these things. And it just showed up for me. It was like boom, 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 boom. And I was like, it's because I became it. Right. And when we can, like, truly, whatever it is, business, relationships, success, friendships, when we can become that thing, like it's so just right there for us. And
Well,
it's
that's the
not a
key,
coincidence.
right? That's the key to manifestation, is believing in something before it's here, because what is in front of you right now is the result of what you thought yesterday, and your thoughts are always creating your future. So that's again why it's so important. Like, if you just keep talking about, losing weight, losing weight, losing weight, how do I lose weight, right? You're focused on the weight
It not
and
being
you're
there.
going to gain more. And I love that story so much, Sari, especially the fact that, a lot of times people are like, oh, so I just have to like sit around and meditate and everything I want comes to me. It's like, well, yes, and action is important, but action should feel good. You should want to take action. It shouldn't be I don't want to force myself. I got to make myself do, like, I make myself go to dance class. It's like, I can't wait to go to dance class, right? That's the
Yeah.
difference. And finding that functional doctor, and meditation. I mean, that's, if I only could choose one tool, which thankfully I don't, but if I had to choose one tool that would change your life, it's meditation,
I agree.
because it's in those little moments of quiet that the truth of who you are and your truth comes through so strongly. And for me, I'm so excited. I just looked at this. January 1st is going to be my 1,800 days of consecutive meditation. I meditated on and off for 15 years before that. I was like, I'm a crazy person. I don't know how, I have a very active mind. I was like, I can't do this. And I would start and I'd stop and I would do the Oprah and Deepak thing, 21 days, and I would fall off. And then it was actually a I had with my business coach at the time, almost 5 years ago. And she whining about my website not being done, blah, blah, blah. She said, I don't care about your website. Tell me about your self-care. Like, where is that at? What's happening there? And I made a decision in my mind at that moment, like, all right, it's time to really take hold of this meditation thing. And I feel like since I've done that, my life has changed more on a stress level. Like, I've become a different person more in the last 5 years than in all the years before that. And I credit that to meditation.
Well,
And
it's like taking a pill, right? It's your magic pill that instead of taking an antidepressant or anti-anxiety or whatever it is, you're taking your pill of meditation every day. That is your medicine, right? And people look at meditation as this like work or it's hard or I don't know how to meditate or all these things. It's like all you have to do is fucking sit there, you know?
yeah. And also, I think people think like, I can't quiet my mind. And I'm like, yeah, now I'm here telling you, like, I have been doing this almost 5 years without missing a day. And I still have days where I don't shut up during my meditation. But
Absolutely.
it's
Same.
not what happens in the meditation. It's the act of showing up that's so important energetically. I think the act of that being non-negotiable has so much value on your confidence, your self esteem, your belief in yourself, right? All of those things. But then it's the having even just that 30 seconds where you let go of all of those crazy thoughts. That's when the floodgates open, and later in your day the ideas come, the inspiration comes, all of the stuff that you don't even know is there. You kind of said this before about how like the universe is lining things up for you. And when you meditate, that's when you open your eyes to be able to
Yeah.
see how that path lights up for you.
Yeah. And just as you said too, I mean, I typically prefer to do an hour meditation every day. And, if not, then, I get in 20 or 30 minutes, depending on the day. With kids, it's crazy sometimes. But like, even on the days that I meditate for an hour, and like 55 minutes of that hour is just getting my mind to shut the fuck up. And I had 5 minutes of bliss, like it was worth it. Right. And I tend to be more proud of myself on those days than the days that it was easy to show up. Right. Because you went through the mud and you got through it, right? And I mean, I got a lotus tattoo for Thich Nhat Hanh's book, No Mud, No Lotus, because the lotus cannot grow without growing through the mud first. And we have to get through some of those hard days or those thoughts that are consuming us to become the witness, to become aware of what's showing up so that we can change and we can let them go and we can invite in those beautiful manifestations.
Yeah, and we're human, right? I mean, I try to meditate for an average of about 15-20 minutes a day, and I do a variety of different meditations based on how active my mind is, right? Like
Yeah.
if my mind is super active, I'm not going to sit and just do a breathing meditation. That's too hard. I have to listen to somebody else's voice, so that even sometimes it's my own meditations I'm listening back to, right? But just to get that little bit of quiet, it's like meet yourself where you are instead of trying to force yourself forward to where you're not, because that never, it's the square peg in the round hole, like that just
Right.
never works. And also, kind of what you said is like when you experience that busyness of your mind, you appreciate the quietness even more. So, but
Mm-hmm.
most of us we're so trained to just get mad at ourselves for being able to do it, or thinking that we're not doing it right, or whatever it is. But it's like, instead, just focus on the things that you are doing and how that makes you feel about yourself, and noticing those moments, right? I love to reflect whenever I'm feeling a lot of negative emotion. I realize it's because I'm out of alignment, because I'm feeling something that is different, that is not aligned with my highest self. And my highest self will never meet me in the mud, right? My highest self is waiting for me, is calling me out of the
Yeah.
mud. And it's not saying there's something wrong with you because you're in the mud. It's saying, oh, you're having fun in the mud because it's way nicer up here, right? In the sunshine. And so I think it's just, there's not one answer, I think, that's right for everybody. But when you have those moments of quiet in your morning, what's right for you? I know I say in the morning, but it doesn't have to be in the morning. But I like the mornings because you have less other voices in your head when you first get up.
Well, you get to
It's,
start your day with that.
yeah, yeah. And again, it's like that act of saying, I'm the most important thing, like my mental, and how I finally like flip that switch into meditating being non-negotiable is, I had this thought in my head, like, I brush my teeth every day, twice a day. I love brushing my teeth. Like, it doesn't feel good to me to go out of my house or go to bed without brushing my teeth. And I thought, why would I take better care of my teeth than my mind?
Yeah.
And that was it. That was all I had to say to
Well, and
myself. And it was like,
it's
it's
this
done.
the same thing as like the physical, right? People go to the gym every single day. Well, if you're going to the gym and you're exercising your body, don't you think you should also exercise your mind? And that being a form of self-care. I mean, so many of the women I work with are these givers, right? And especially, I think, mothers too, constantly giving to your children and to your family and everything like that. And if you're not taking care of yourself first, we're giving to them with not a full cup. And then we start to feel even more exhausted and more lethargic and more resentful. And if we're not creating space for ourselves to come first before any of that happens, how can we show up fully? And so I think, yes, it's a non-negotiable. And with everyone, I know you as well, I work with, like, meditation is a non-negotiable. It's something that has to show up.
Oh, and especially as a parent, and I just think for me, I used my kids as a barometer. So if I was doing something and I would flip it over and go, okay, what if my child was saying, I don't have time for my own self-care. Like, I don't have time to take care of my mental health. How would that feel to me? And then I also realized, like, I am always modeling, right? Like, your words don't matter. They're watching, they're following they're
Oh, yeah.
getting, and even if they have no language for it themselves, they don't quite understand what's happening. They feel it. Everybody feels energy, right? And so it's just I use that to inspire me to take better care of myself, because I want nothing more for my kids than to claim their self-care as their top priority. Because, like you said, you can't fill a cup from an empty pitcher. You have to
Yes.
be, and that's even for me, things like watching the news. Like, I stopped watching the news a few years
Agreed.
ago because I realized that it didn't help me be a better human. And you can say I'm ignorant, or head in the sand, all of this stuff. And I just had a conversation with someone else who said, I can't not know what's going on in Israel. I can't not know. And I'm
But
like,
what are
yeah,
you
what?
also doing about it would be my question.
Well, that's the thing. And I get it. It's like there's the knowing, but it's like, is that empowering? Or is that
Right.
disempowering? Because I get the impression that that's very disempowering, and it just feeds the fire. It's like, what if you took that energy and you focused it towards connection and peace, and looked for, like, actively sought out the good news? Places where you see, I saw this. I don't know why I have Israel on the brain. I guess because we talked about me going to Israel, but
Yeah.
I saw this photo of these two little boys, like an Israeli boy and a Jewish boy and an Arab boy, and it was just from the back, and one had the arm around the other, and it was just gorgeous. And I just thought, like, how do we get more of those in the news feed? And I know
Yeah.
it's not to say that these things aren't happening. I know they're happening, but knowing the details of it only would increase my
It's
own
causing more,
anxiety.
yeah, fear and
And then
survival.
and it made me short tempered, and I would snap. And I just realized, again, I went back to this, like, this does not make me a better human. It does not allow me to serve from my heart. It makes me serve from a place where that feels really broken and fractured. And it's just, that's not service. That's not how I want to show up.
Yeah. And I think that too, when, you know, when all of the households are watching the 5 o'clock news at the same time, right? It's collectively creating this fear, this survival, this feeling of unease in your body, right? Versus, like, if we were, you know, putting out a meditation at 5 o'clock for every household to do, what would that collectively change our world, right? And if we can start showing up and changing us as a whole collectively, then that's changing the vibration versus constantly absorbing these fears and survival based off what we're watching and taking in, that most of the time we don't have any power over. Like you're saying, we do have power over ourselves, and that to me changes more than changing through fear.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's disproportionate. I mean, I know there are horrific things going on everywhere all the time, but it's disproportionate because I think there's far more good happening than the fear mongers want us to believe. And so they scour the planet, they look for the absolute worst things to tell us about. Everybody then picks it up. It's played on repeat multiple times a day. And then once that issue is solved or has some resolution towards it, we stop hearing about it. Let's go and find the
Mm,
next worst thing to talk about. And how do we think that that makes us better humans? I don't know. Like, how does that make us more productive? Or definitely doesn't make us happier. That's for sure. And even things, not like things like the economy, these stories that we're fed and how they perpetuate fear and scarcity. And in every economy, high and low, there are people who are successful, there's innovation, there's resourcefulness, and there's also scarcity, there's greed, there's fear, there's worry, there's both those things. So which one do you want to pick, right? Like,
right.
choose wisely. You
I
get to
agree.
choose.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. So, Nikki, if you had a loudspeaker right now that was going to the entire world, what would you want to say?
Your life is supposed to be fun. If you can follow that a little bit more throughout your day, within, I would say, even a week, you would experience things that will change you forever, that will help you continue on that path, and that you were not put on this planet for struggle and for stress and for sacrifice. That is not your highest good. Your highest good comes from when you do the things that you feel the best at, because that will light up everybody in your presence. And then they will want to go and do what they're best at. And people who are happy, right? You've heard this, hurt people hurt people. Well, happy people, right? So don't you want to be the person spreading happiness and following your passions and your dreams? You can start doing that today. Even one
Mm,
small thing, like follow one small thing, like ask yourself, what's one thing I can do today purely because it feels good, for no other reason? And just start doing that once a day. And that alone will set you on a trajectory towards a life of magnificence.
I love that. So, happy people make happy people. I love that. Hell yes. Well, Nikki, if anyone is listening today and just really feels connected and aligned with you, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, you can definitely find me on social media. Nikki Dean Life Queen is my handle on Instagram. And I'm emailing me is probably the best right now. Info at Nikki Dean Wellbeing. Oh, sorry, Nikki Dean Life Queen. That was my old website. The new website should be up soon within the next couple of weeks. So you can look for that too, nikkideanlifequeen.com. And that's Nikki.
Perfect. Well, Nikki, it's such a pleasure always to be in your presence. And I'm so grateful you came on today and shared your wisdom and your story and just your happiness and your due diligence to just keep fucking moving forward and listening to yourself. It's such an inspiration. And I know it's going to inspire others. So thank you so much, sister. Love you.
Well, thank you, Sari. This has been such an honor. I just absolutely adore you. I love what you're doing. You have so many great guests. I can't wait to keep listening to your podcast. And I do want to offer for all of your podcast, I don't know, they're not viewers, but podcast listeners, just a special offer. If anyone does want to reach out to me, I would be so happy to offer you a complimentary coaching session with me. And all you have to do is mention Sari or this podcast, and I'll get you booked up for some free time. And I hold nothing back in those free sessions. I give you everything. So I hope you'll take me
Mm,
up on it.
so generous, Nikki. Love you. All
Love
right.
you.
Until next time. Love you, girl.
Bye. Thank you.